Good morning, I'm Morgan of morgandonner.com, and today is my second video showing how I went about making the red Miss Maisel dress. In my first video, I showed you how to drape the pattern on my dress dummy here, and then translating that pattern into a physical, like, paper pattern, which I then made my very first on-me mock-up. Now that didn't turn out so beautifully, but that's okay. That's how we learn and adjust our pattern. So I went ahead and did some quick fixes, which you'll see in this video. But before we run straight into the pattern adjustment, let's take a close look at the mock-up and compare it to Mrs. Maisel's dress to see what all needs to change. Starting at the back, I can immediately see a couple of things that need some work. I was really needlessly worried about the sleeves being too short whenever I draped them. I can see now that they ended up being way too long. I'm a little bit surprised about the neckline though. I thought that I was making it really high, but apparently not high enough. The bottom half of the bodice is full of wrinkles, but that's probably mostly because the bodice is bumping up against my skirt, causing it to bunch up, and the seam allowance is still there, which is creating some extra length that won't actually be there when everything is said and done. There's also a little bit of excessive wrinkling behind the sleeve. The original dress has that too, but not quite this much. Moving on to the front, the sleeves are of course still too long. That hasn't changed. The cutout is actually a bit too big, and it looks like the angle of the wrap front needs to be a little bit steeper. My bust darts seem to be at a little bit of an angle, while hers are pretty perpendicular to the ground, so I'll need to adjust the angle of the dart slightly towards the side seam. The bust seems a little bit high here, but I'm a bit worried about lowering it, because I think that it'll make it even more difficult for me to hide my bra, so I might just have to live with the fact that it's a little bit higher than hers. It looks like the neckline leading up to my shoulder might need to go out a little bit, but I think I want to get everything else fitting better before I change that up too much. Now that I've got a better idea of what I need to change, let's start pattern version number 2. First off, let's take off a whole maybe 2 to 3 inches from the sleeve, since it was way too long. Based on some advice I saw from Century's Sewing on my last video, I checked out kimono sleeves, also called grown-on sleeves, and saw that several of them had this little curved bit under the arm. Makes loads of sense now that I've seen it. Time to copy the old back pattern onto a new bit of paper, and I need to make sure that the back is a little bit longer here at the neck, basically removing the visible line of neck versus shoulder. It's all just one smooth curve now. First piece down, and don't forget to label as you go. When I have multiple iterations of a pattern like this, I like to label each new series with a number so I don't get similar looking pieces confused between the different versions. This one is version number 2. Moving on to the front piece, I'm going to have to change the angle of the wrap a little bit, so I'm going to fold the paper here, and I want to add a little bit to the side seam. That'll help reduce the amount of extra large cutout that I had before. I think that the top of the dart was mostly okay, but the bottom needs to be angled a little bit more towards the side. I want to smooth out the top a little bit here. I think that I was making things a little bit more complicated than they needed to be before. For the shoulder slash strap slash sleeve piece, or dragon piece, as I ended up calling it in the last video, I've decided to go a slightly different direction. I really need to simplify the sewing order of operations near the side seam here, and I also need to true up the patterns a little bit. To fix this funny piece, I'm placing the back pattern on the front, aligning it up at the side seam, starting at the waist. And now I'm copying the side seam from the back, including the grown-on cap sleeve. If it makes more sense, think of it this way. You know how on most patterns, the back and the front pieces are almost identical. There's always, of course, slight differences, but you know what I mean? Mostly the same. That's how I'm mentally tackling this strange shoulder piece. I think I was making the pattern way more difficult and complicated than it really needed to be. I like to pin my paper pattern to the fabric, then cut out all the pieces. Once cut, I can reclaim all my pins and then assemble the pattern pieces. I like to sew the darts first, and then I did the seam that joins the two front pieces together. Next comes the side seam, and then the shoulder. Ironing the seams open helps everything lie nice and smooth when trying on a project, and ironing the seam allowances over for the neckline and the waist helps give a real true sense of how it would look as a finished garment. I also sewed the seam allowances down so they can't flip up out of place when I try it on. Alright, it's looking super cute, guys. I feel like a goddamn princess. I don't know what kind of princess. So what I'm going to do real quick here, so that I don't have to keep holding it this whole time, is I'm going to go ahead and get this pinned in place. On hers, this part matches up with the seam, the bust dart. There we go, that feels about right. The way her garment moves in some of the footage, she has, you know, maybe it's one of those little clips, or it could be a hook and eye. She has something that is definitely causing like tension and gaping here. So my final version will definitely need to include some sort of inner mechanism here to keep it closed. In the show, it's pretty clear that this is not the actual closure method for her dress. It's just the visual interest component. The dress in the show zips up the back. So let's do a quick twirl around so you can see all of the mock-up as it currently stands. We've got the front, side, not that there's a lot of source imagery from the side, and then the back. I am feeling so much better about how it's looking now. Before, I was getting real nervous. Normally my mock-ups aren't that bad. I'm debating on whether or not this is too high. The waistline is too high, because when I compare it to her, I feel like hers is much longer in the waist, but I don't know how much of that is proportionate to just she has a long, slim torso, you know, waist, whereas I don't as much. I have kind of a short, squat little waist. I think that I want to see what it looks like if I were to add a skirt to just this as it currently stands, because maybe it'll be just fine and it'll look good, especially once I toss on a belt, or maybe it won't, and we'll need to maybe lengthen it a little bit. It is a little bit big, like it could stand to lose some room. I have a feeling that this is maybe a little too far in. I feel like on her dress it's truly like way up in the armpit. We'll see. The arms I feel are way closer than they were last time. Like, the arms feel pretty good. They were maybe a little tight. It looks okay. Like, not bad. It helps that like this doesn't completely cup all the way underneath my bust, because it gives the illusion of me having a similar angle as the marvelous Miss Maisel. When I don't. I've definitely got a little bit more roundage going on. That about wraps it up for this video. Join me in part 3 where I add a skirt and maybe start working with the actual fabric. We'll see.